I want to show a couple pictures here. These little children I worked with at one point, and the little boy, they were both having abduction experiences. I asked him to make a drawing of what the figure looked like that used to come and take him at night out the door. And so we sat down, he made this little drawing for me. And when you begin to analyze the drawing, the thing that looks like hair is, he said, that's light coming off it. It was glowing. And he drew the head, then he drew the eyes, and then he drew the glowing light. Then he put the mouth in, and I think that's probably just a way to make the whole thing more fierce. He sticks the arms out like that, as if it's eating into the space around it. Now, just on the physical level here, away from the psychological level, you have these sorts of problems happening all the time. This scoop mark turned up on a 5-year-old, and this was healed virtually overnight. The father had taken this little boy to a dermatologist because of some condition he had, and the dermatologist gave him some salve. This had to do with a rash or something, and said to come back in 5 days. And when he came back 5 days later, this mark was there, which hadn't been there 5 days earlier. And the dermatologist said, what in the world caused this? And he said, I have no idea. And he said, but it wasn't here 5 days ago. It's all healed. And of course there was no real normal explanation for this, since he had been examined in this area by a doctor one day, and 5 days later re-examined, and that's what it looked like. But if these things are happening on a physical plane, and the child cannot resist, cannot object, is maybe tricked into accepting this, you have a very conflicted and very frightened child. This is another drawing that a child has done, and the point here is children's attention to details has to do with what they render details in the order of importance that they see them. A child, when they draw, the youngest child starts with what is the simplest, most important thing, and that is a vague, lumpy circle, which is somebody's head, mommy's head, say. The next thing a child learns how to do a little bit later is to put in eyes, because that's mommy looking at you, and the child understands the value of eye contact. So eyes are next. Then the child puts in a mouth, because the child eats and mommy talks, and so the mouth is the next most important thing. Ears and noses come in much, much later. The next thing a child almost always does, hands and arms are terribly important, so he puts the hands and arms in, but no body. They come out of the head. Later the body comes in, but the child is proceeding in terms of what's important. Well, when you look at drawings that children make of aliens, the basic controlling fact of those eyes, those huge black eyes. It's another drawing. A psychotherapist who is an abductee, who I've worked with, has kept this object, a ceramic, on her desk all her life. She didn't know why she found it so compelling. It was made by her daughter, who is going through the same kinds of experiences when the daughter was a tiny child. And the daughter said, "This is an owl, Mommy." And again, it has one feature, really. That's it, these eyes. But oddly, it connected with the mother in a very powerful way. One little boy made this drawing, which I find very touching. He remembered being taken into a ship, and he saw a little boy who he knew in the neighborhood on this table. And notice the table is a solid block, as it's often described in abduction cases. And the alien figure, you see, has one huge eye, because the child was trying to do a profile. So he puts a big frontal eye in a profile head, which is something the Egyptians never got out of. But what's happening is the doctor, alien type, is putting some kind of a needle into this corner of this child's eye. And this little boy witnessed this and was terrified for months after about his own eye, as if something was going to happen to him. But the drawings are, I think, wonderful illustrations of what children think about when they have these experiences. It isn't very pleasant. Incidentally, one woman that I have worked with sort of woke up as a tiny child, and she was banging her head against the wall, and she had actually damaged her teeth and her nose, skinned her nose, and was forcing herself against the wall when her mother heard this racket and ran in. She was maybe 3. And her mother said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm trying to go through the wall." And she said, "But children, you can't go through a wall." She said, "Oh yes, I go through the wall." And at this point, she couldn't go through at that particular time. She wasn't given the magic Shazam, or whatever the word is you have to have before you go through the wall. This is a drawing by Linda Napolitano's son, John. He was, I think, about 7 when he drew this. And it's a drawing I particularly love. He had remembered an abduction. This is all conscious stuff. He's taken in. He made this drawing for me afterwards. And that is, he points out, that's him in the middle. And the reason there are curving lines around his head and his mouth looks strange, he said, "My teeth were chattering and I was shaking because I was so scared." And very interestingly, there is a figure, an alien figure, sitting at the right at some kind of a console. And John said, "You know, he never even looked at me. He didn't turn around and look." Which is kind of an interesting, when a child says that, you know he's telling the truth. Simply because a child, if he's making it up and he's that little, he's going to be the center of attention. He was hurt that there was not even a look. And the man I was telling you about at the beginning, who videotaped his own, the machine that he was abducted into, described that when he was taken into the craft, he said figures were moving around in this room doing one thing or another, and he said none of them turned around to look at me. As if the whole thing was a kind of mechanical, as if he was, he later said that the wonderful image, he said, you know, what it looked like, the way they were moving around so purposefully and not relating to me and not actually treating me as if I'm not, they were treating me as if I'm not even there. He said, it was as if, he said, I went once into a big Italian restaurant, and they had a great big window into the kitchen, and you could see everybody moving around in the kitchen and shifting things and picking up plates and staying out of each other's way, and there was no communication. He said, that's what this looked like in this craft, a wonderful image. On the left side is, of course, an alien standing there, and I've pointed this out before. I think this is a wonderful drawing. The accuracy of children's thinking. He gives himself a nose, but you see the aliens are not given noses. He gives himself a mouth and teeth and a tongue. They have just a slit. He makes their face somewhat gray by putting in dots all over it. He gives himself hair. They're not given hair. But the most interesting thing is he draws their hands, his hands, the way children often do, is a series of little loops like a flower. At least my daughter did that, and lots of children do at some point. But he said their fingers were long and thin and pointed, and they only had 4. And he said, you know, they talk to you with their eyes. But at any rate, this child was extremely terrified, and the next day when he remembered all of this and told his mother, before he even got into this, he looked at her and he said, why don't you love me anymore? And she said, but I do love you. And he said, no, you don't, because while they were taking me, you were just standing there and you weren't doing anything. You weren't doing anything to help me.
if we wanted to examine a variety of evidence types, including some of the more ancient records, we might find that they could be considered more correctly perhaps interloping farmers.
Interloping farmers?
Well, the way that we, as a species, the human species, has taken over wild animals time and again and domesticated them and genetically altered them for our benefit.
Well, that's true. While we certainly did not create cows, we could be considered their farmers, couldn't we?
Exactly, and we genetically manipulated them through the centuries through selective breeding programs in the beginning and then through more laboratory-type methods in the recent years.
All right, we use cows for food.
Right.
While you don't rule that out with regard to how the aliens may be using us, what is your best guess, based on your research, as to what they're doing with us?
Well, they're doing a variety of things with us, and this is what makes it hard, Art. We know they're taking certain kinds of substances from us. They take sperm, they take ova, they may well be taking fetuses if we can trust the perceptions of the people who've reported this. They take body fluids, they add fluids to our system. They take flesh samples, hair samples. They take energy. In fact, one of the more common things that I began to run into when I was making connections with many other cases of abduction reports was a phenomenon that some people call being vacuumed, where you're in a totally normal physical energy state, and then as if a switch was thrown and a vacuum sucks all your energy out, you totally are without any energy. It's more than exhaustion. When it happened to me, I couldn't even move my lips to talk. And it took 15, 20 minutes of recovery time to regain energy. So they certainly are taking energy in some way.
All right, I've talked to a lot of people who call up who think they have been abducted or tampered with in some way, and they have awakened in the middle of the night to a paralyzed state. Is that a common report?
Sure, it's a common report. They either wake paralyzed or become that way soon after perceiving entities or a light in the room. Yes. But if it were all just happening in the bedroom, I think we'd have a very different phenomenon. You know, of course, from the other calls you've gotten that it happens to groups of people at the same time. It happens in the middle of the day, on the highway, in town, at parties. So we're not dealing with something that's easily explainable as a night phenomenon, but that does seem to be a very, very common occurrence.
And again, your view is what? That there's a genetic reason, perhaps, for all of this experimentation?
I think part of it may be, given the kinds of reports we have, that they are certainly doing something that's quite physical in both its aim and its procedures, that this is not a spiritual phenomenon primarily, as some people would very much like it to be. The purpose of a spiritual phenomenon is not being served by a number of procedures that are reported over and over again in the abduction scenario. These are very physical concerns, brain operations, blood alterations, implants, for instance, which would really have nothing to do with a spiritual phenomena.
That's true. What is the state of the research into these implants? I know that we have actually some physical samples of implants. What is the best available evidence, do you know?
Oh, very little, to tell you the truth. The best available evidence I've heard recently has concerned reports of analysis into a number of potential or alleged implant objects, but so far nothing has turned up that is easily explained. Some are completely terrestrial materials, but that still doesn't explain who made them or for what purpose. Others appear to be just anomalous in the sense that they can say what it isn't, but they can't really say what it is, nor, in fact, that it's extraterrestrial in origin.
All right, is it necessarily extraterrestrial in origin? And I go back to my visit last week with Dr. Mack from Harvard. He said that, look, a lot of these implants that have been analyzed have turned out to be very terrestrial in terms of the materials in them.
Exactly.
Dr. Mack is not blind to the possibility that these creatures, whatever they are, may come from either another time or another dimension, but in fact from this Earth, on some plane from this very Earth. And if that would be true, it would explain the materials being common to this Earth.
Certainly, if they had been interacting with our species for a long, long time, they would know very well the materials on this plane, or this Earth.
Sure, they would.
Wherever they come from, if they came from another planet, if they came from another dimension, if they came from a dimension parallel to ours on this planet, those are all possibilities because we don't have any answers. And they certainly behave as if they dimensional hop, in a sense. They manipulate dimension. They manipulate time. There's no doubt about that. And their physical activities, as we've observed them, show they manipulate spatially.
Te lo juro por mi vida que es un platillo ahorita. A ver. De aquí me voy a apoyar, irá. Allá está, irá, al lado de la antena. Esto sí me emocionó. Te lo juro, ven, para que veas cómo se ve el platillo. Ven. Ven, Cherito, ven. Me pongo nervioso, no puedo.
¿Cómo no tienen los binoculares?
Ya no lo encuentro. ¿Por qué no enfoca? Ve, Cherito, ve. ¿Ya viste? Es un platillo, ve. Como ser en la tele, ve cómo son. Dime que no. Es un maldito platillo.
And Jim, I'm going to start with you. I want you to describe what you saw when you arrived in this field where this supposed downed aircraft was.
Well, first of all, we were in a field hunting for this downed aircraft, and the first rescue team already found it and radioed into the fire hall, gave the coordinates, and it was down in front of us, and we hightailed it out of our search area, went down into there, and we got there expecting a smashed up airplane. Wings, fuselage, etc. No such character. Came down through the woods, and here's this humongous piece of metal laying there. I mean, this thing I've described time and time again as a very large acorn-shaped object. The front of it, or I presume was the front of it, was pushed down into the dirt where the way it came in and landed after it took out the top of the trees and brush and everything coming in. Came back in an oblong shape. Around the bottom was what I call a bumper, and then the bottom was perfectly flat. No signs of propulsion or anything. There was no doors, no windows. There was no ways of getting in this thing, at least none that I seen. There was no seams on it, no rivets, nothing. The only thing I seen was this bumper around it, and it had these real strange markings on it, which I've often referred to as similar to the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. So, as a volunteer fireman, we did what we were supposed to do. Find the crash site, do a preliminary investigation for survivors or treat anybody with it, which we didn't because there was none that we could see. There was no way of getting in this object. The first team had already radioed in its position. We're there 10, 15 minutes all talking around, doing a preliminary search, wondering what we discovered. Two gentlemen come down through the woods, trench coats on, ramrod stiff, crew cut. All right, this is a restricted area. You're now ordered to get out of it. Oh, wait a minute, I'm a civilian. You ain't gonna order me nothing. But as a fireman, I'm being relieved from what I'm doing. So I got out of there. We're going out through the woods. We didn't go no more than 15, 20 feet. And I know from me to you, here come the military. Full uniforms, equipment, marching right down through the woods with flashlights. This is December. It's late in the evening, it's cold, it's wet.
How far away were you from a military base?
Well, the closest base that I knew of was Pittsburgh, which was approximately 45 miles to the west.
So within 15 minutes of your arrival at the site, the military was there?
You got it.
Okay, all right. Now, what did they say to you after this happened? I mean, I know there were several members of the report I saw in Unsolved Mysteries. Several members of the community were there. People, right? Other people that were part of the community were there and present and were all told to leave.
There was no press or media at the immediate crash site. What I didn't know up on top of the hill, because I'd come in through the side, the military had taken over a farmhouse. I mean, from what I understand, military brass. They took over up there, did all their orders and whatever they were doing from up there, And that's where I presume that the military who came down through the woods came from. Because when we went out, we had to walk back to the fire hall, which was approximately the way we had to go, I'd say a good mile. But by the time we got back to the fire hall, it was wall-to-wall military. I mean, there was trucks and jeeps and cars. There was guards on the door.
Did anybody say to you, I don't want you talking about this, don't say a word about this, or were you, with that term, debriefed?
What they did, I mean, these people virtually told us just to shut up, get to your vehicles, and be quiet.
That doesn't mean that we can rule out this approach to communication. It seems to me far more likely that an advanced civilization would communicate interdimensionally and telepathically. The amounts of time available for an intelligent species to evolve these kinds of communication are vast.
My first actual sighting of a UFO didn't occur until my early teens when I lived in the country with my parents and brothers and sisters. My older brother yelled for us one night to come and look out the bedroom window. We all went running to the window and looked out. About half a mile away was a string of colorful lights moving just above the tree line to the south. It was moving west to east. My first encounter with a UFO occurred many years before when I was around 4 or 5 years old. He was totally human and was dressed in a red flight suit. People didn't wear red back then. I guess I'm aging myself when I say that, but it's true. People didn't wear loud colors like that when I was a child. Maybe that's why I remember it so well. He has been with me telepathically since then. I've also met at least one gray. He doesn't like humans at all. One short blue being, and the tans, who seem to be somewhat more inclined to be friendly than the grays. The human was, to use my daughter's slang, a hunk. Gray was taller than me and was accompanied by the blue, who was shorter than me. They were walking ahead of me down a curving corridor, and silly me was trotting along behind them like a good little girl. I remember looking down at the blue and thinking I had never seen a blue person before. When I thought this, he turned and grimaced at me. I guess it was a grin, but it looked more like a grimace. After the second encounter with the red-seated humans when I lived in South Texas, I came down with a ringworm-like rash that lasted for 6 weeks, and this was 20 years after the first remembered encounter. With the tans and the grays, I can always count on a violent headache the next morning, accompanied by nausea and vomiting. Sometimes the headaches last for a week. My telephone acts crazy sometimes. Toward the middle of January of this year, my phone rang and I picked it up. There was no one on the line, but the line was open. I could vaguely pick up a conversation on the line, but it was more like a cross conversation. That wasn't too bad, but the eerie thing is I have 2 lines on the phone and couldn't get either line to disconnect from the phone call. I hung up, waited a minute, and then picked up the phone again. The lines were still open. There are times when I can be sitting and reading and all the power in the house will just shut down. Sometimes it's back on within minutes. Other times it will be off for up to 30 minutes or more. We've had to buy alarm clocks with battery backup so we don't oversleep in the morning. I've heard the clicking sounds in the middle of the night just before I get the old familiar electrical zap, and then I'm out until morning. I've been the recipient of the electrical zap all my life. Until I started reading about UFO abductions, I thought everyone had these zaps, so I never thought of them as peculiar. The zaps aren't painful. It's like getting shot, but without any associated pain. It goes through the center of my body. There are, however, sometimes powerful enough zaps that they make me sit up in bed. As far as family involvement goes, the majority of my family has been involved in some way with UFO activity. Both of my sisters, my daughter, and myself have a brown mark on our left leg between the knee and ankle. Mine is on the right inner side of my left leg. My brothers who drive trucks have not only seen UFOs, but have been followed by them. My youngest sister feels compelled at times to drive out to the country and lie down in her car and go to sleep. She will awaken in an hour or so and drive back to town. The only thing I know for sure is this. Whatever their reasons for being here, and they've been here for a very, very long time, we haven't been seriously injured. If they wanted to kill us or take over the planet, they would have done so. I hope in the not-too-distant future we'll find out what their purpose is.
They could also do the same thing. Sir John Eccles, Nobel Prize winner for his research on the brain, describes the brain as, quote, a machine that a ghost can operate, unquote. What he means by that is your spirit operates your brain in a normal state of consciousness. In an altered state, reached under yoga, a TM, hypnosis, you have loosened the normal connection between your spirit and your brain, and that allows another spirit, other entities, other minds to interpose themselves and begin to tick off the neurons in your brain, create a universe of illusion.
It's Sunday. It was me and Mark's was driving around checking the cows. Come upon a cow that was dead. They cut the nose off, tongue was out, and the sex organs were gone. Oh, I said, one brother said it must have been from a sex cult from the university. Out here messing around. I says, probably was. I said, we won't catch him yet.
Okay, Pat, you're doing fine. I'd like to have you now turn your attention to the evening that you and Mark were looking at that craft. You were looking through the scope.
I says, Mark, I said, let's get the hell out of here. I said, that star's coming. I says, he said, that or my eyes are bad. He says, it's coming. Change from a pure white to an orange. I said, Mark, son of it picking up a cow. I said, you hear that cow? Hell, she's bawling.
And it seems to be hovering there over the ridge.
Right, hovering, picking up the cow.
And can you see the cow?
No.
But you can hear the cow?
Right, cow. It was terrible.
Terrible. Bawling?
It's terrible. Worse than I ever heard a cow.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a few.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then.
And all of a sudden, like they threw a valve or a switch. Everything stopped. The craft is still there. Cows wasn't no ball.
No sound from the cow.
No, it's like they should throw a switch. Weird. Back of my neck, hair on the back of my neck was straight up.
And the next day, you said you drove over there?
Right.
Mm-hmm. What do you find when you drive over?
Well, we didn't go over there till 10 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
We waited till it was damn good daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we weren't taking a chance.
Mm-hmm.
We went and looked all over, along the side of the hill. All we found was another cow in 2 miles, just a lone calf, bawling for its mom. I said, but they took her. We never found her.
Miguel Angel Torres recorded this segment over the central portion of Mexico City. The enhancement shows a metallic craft emanating bursts of color, a corona effect we have not seen before. At the Televisa studios, the 6 best videos taken during the historic eclipse are put through comparative analysis. All are disc-shaped, structured, metallic objects that reflect sunlight. The masters of the stars could not have planned this better. At a time when all eyes were cast to the sky, 17 different people in different quadrants of the city, videotaped an object hovering below the great eclipse of July 11, 1991. The sixth sun and the era of cosmic awareness had begun. Whether by design or accident, The UFO flap over Mexico City is, thanks to the video camcorder, the most documented mass sighting ever. The object or objects were seen and paced for a duration of 30 minutes.
When I regained consciousness, I was sitting in front of this, my monitor, and there were nothing but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people sitting in front of monitors also. They either had a line that was hooked into their forearms, the back of their forearms, or the bottom of their forearms, which I think can explain in a sense what scoop marks are put in there, and then some of them had lines in their calves, the back, up behind your shin, yeah, your calf. And what I learned that to be, which I'm pretty certain what that was about, was we were all about to get an environmental lesson in this mass abduction, which has been going on a global basis. And also different things that you can do, which I'm going to get into that in a second. What these tubes were that were stuck in us, I believe, were something to heighten the emotions to an extreme. Meaning that all these monitors all lit up at the same time. And you could tell, and I always describe it this way, like at a television shop when you see like 50 TVs and they all go on at the same time, that glow in the room, all of that's the same. So all these monitors light up at the same time, and there's a scene appears. The first scene that shows up was an Earth, they're all Earth scenes, was the ocean. It was a beautiful, drop-dead gorgeous, turquoise blue, fresh, teeming with fish, and you could see the sky was crystal clear. And with whatever they had hooked into us, and the way the colors were coming through on this site, you just went, oh my God. It just took your breath away. You're going, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It just overwhelmed you with the pristine beauty of the planet. And you knew when you were watching that, and all of us were watching that this was a time period before we kind of messed things up environmentally. And then there was a hum, like, and then 3 seconds would go by, then you'd hear the hum again, and then another scene would appear, and that scene was like a mountain scene. It had snow on top of the mountains and beautiful, healthy trees, and again the sky was crystal clear, and you're just going, God, it's so gorgeous, it's gorgeous. You just got into it. And then it was one beautiful Earth scene after the other, after the other, after the other, and then they slowly started getting ugly, where the beautiful ocean was a mousy, nasty brown. The fish were bloated and floating in the water. The air was, or the sky was a nasty color, and you were just going, oh God, no, I don't want to see that. And each scene got uglier and uglier. And then the telepathic voice in everybody's head, all at the same time as these scenes were getting uglier, were, you're killing your planet. Your planet is dying. You're killing your planet. Your planet is dying. So they let us see all this wondrous beauty of what it was like, and then did a reverse emotional thing with whatever was hooked up us, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't take this. And I didn't want to take it, so I saw on the bottom left-hand side of my monitor symbols that were part of a filing system for these scenes. So I didn't want to look at that, so I kept looking at those to see if I can decipher it. And then the sound no came into my head, and on my screen was an N and an O. It wasn't even the alien symbolic form of no. No. And then I kept looking at it, no, and it kept appearing, and I blacked out.
I'm not your friend. I'm not your enemy. I strive to be more than that. Whatever you think of me, I am. We all have our own universe. It is because none of this is without us. We all get a set of eyes to look through, to configure what we conveniently call reality. And it's so malleable. It's so composed. To our expectations. There is value to the material world. It's just a portrait of what's behind the veil. The realm of ideas that move everything that we could never express. The shocking truth is that to be here. Everything is relative to us. And in a way we do control our fate. It is both our master and our servant. There is no escaping what we choose to create. And what we create chooses us. There are no lies. Because even language is held. It only possesses our truth. And our truth shall be pursued. It is what draws us. In the end, there is the beginning. We can only ever be as free as we comprehend.